Welcome, welcome. You want to kick us off?
All right. So this month we are going to be talking about Lirael. We read Sabriel a few months ago, which we don't have a recording of that discussion. But we thought we would talk about Sabriel for a few minutes at the beginning. How much do you want me to say?
Just hi. Good. So Sabriel, Lirael, I feel like.
Mine has the old cover.
Oh yeah. See, I like yours too. Garth Nix, they're from the Old Kingdom series with Garth Nix. And Garth Nix is Australian author. And I found some lovely things today where this was actually, they're actually a trilogy originally. So I guess he decided to expand at some point, which is just a lovely, delightful thing that authors decide to do. It's a love-hate thing. So the first book was Sabriel. And I guess I'm going to steal your quote. Well, your quote that you posted of Garth Nix's that tells just a little bit about the Old Kingdom and the trilogy. So in these books, there are necromancers who raise and control the dead using 7 named bells. These evil necromancers and the dead themselves are opposed by a family called the Abhorsons, who use their own versions of the bells to make sure that the dead stay in death and do not trespass in life. So that kind of gives the premise for the books. In the first book, we meet Sabriel, who is the Abhorsen in waiting. She's the daughter of the current Abhorsen. And, you know, we're going with all out with spoilers today. She suddenly comes into her own when her father passes on and is kind of thrown into the experience. And we're thrown into this world of magic and death and the power over death. The Abhorsen is the only, so we have necromancers, but it's like the only allowed necromancer. Charter magic. So the charter is, it's the organization of magic, right? I feel like in my head, it's somewhat of a legal thing, but it's not really how it's described. Not really how it's described. It's the organization of magic into an organized thing, like a non-chaotic
force. I think it's like a force.
There you go. What else do you think we need, like from Sabriel, for this to make sense? I guess character.
So in Sabriel, one of the stories starts out, I think she's like 19, or maybe she's 17 right at the beginning, but then she's 19 when her adventure starts. And she was raised, so there's the Old Kingdom, and we posted maps to this. There's the Old Kingdom, and then a country bordering it to the south that's called Ancelstier, and there's a wall that divides them. And Ancelstier is not magical, and the charter does not work there except very close to the wall. So Sabriel was raised in Ancelstier. And so she has to go into the Old Kingdom where she was born, but she's not familiar with it, and just has to kind of learn everything all at once. And her quest is very urgent because she does not know if her father is dead. She just knows that he's trapped in death, and she hopes that she can save him. But it turns out that it was his time to go. So
Yes. I feel like we should introduce Mogget. Mogget is the servant of the Abhorsens, and he is a free magic creature who is bound to serve the family. That's her companion through the whole story, and he comes back up again in Lirael.
And he's a white cat. He's in the form of a white cat.
In the form of a white cat, even though you know that's not his true form. And you kind of go through this whole experience whether you trust him or not, because he knows everything. but he's not, he's there because he's bound to be, not because he wants to be.
And then there's also Touchstone. So she comes across Touchstone and he helps her on the quest and they end up falling in love. And so then in this book, Lirael, which is 14 years later, at least when it starts out, it's 14 years, and then I think it goes later on. But so by that point, then Sabriel and Touchstone are married. And he's been restored to, he's the rightful king of the Old Kingdom. And she is now the Aborson.
Right. And she should say Touchstone is he the illegitimate child of royalty previously? And we find that out at the end of Lirael, or I mean at the end of Sabriel, so.
Yes. But he had been trapped by a magic spell for like 200 years, so he was the only one left. So he gets to be king.
Gets to be king. Gets to be being
yeah.
because it's right and responsibility, right? Yeah. All right, so that leads us into this one. You said it's 14 years later.
When it starts out, I think that's what it is.
I think it is. It's like the opening is, well, it says 14 years into the reign.
Yeah.
The restoration of King Touchstone the First. So that kind of left me out because at the end of Sabriel, they're not married yet. They don't have kids yet. They don't. And in this book, their children are older than 14. So there's a few years gap. So it's really going to be like 20 years since the last book. Yeah, more or less. I didn't actually look up their children's age to like count it specifically. I probably should have done that. So in this book, we're introduced to Lirael, and this takes us into a whole other section of the world of the Old Kingdom, where we're not dealing, well, eventually we're ending up dealing with death and the Aporsons, but like Lirael grows up in the Glacier. And she's part of the Clare, which are the seers of this world. And they're all female. She grows up as a daughter of the Clare. And she's sort of the outcast because she's aging past where she should be to have already received the sight, and she still doesn't have that gift. So like more and more, she's standing out and not accepted by her own culture, even though that's the only thing she wants is to be able to just fit in and to live this. And we find out as we go through that she is, well, she knows she's a daughter of one of the Clare, but her mother has died sometime before, and they don't know where she went or what happened before, but she just shows up and comes back pregnant. So she doesn't know who her father is. They just say at the end, we find out that she's the Alcorson's daughter, the illegitimate daughter of the Alcorson. So she's Sabriel's half sister. So she's living at the Glacier, and she doesn't fit anywhere, and she is just going through this whole find yourself experience. She goes out one day and is contemplating her own life and her worth and all of these things. And she doesn't have an accent. She ends up meeting with, I can't think of the name of the twins, but she ends up meeting with some of the other Clare who take pity on her and realize her situation and send her to the library, which is my nerdy favorite part of the whole book. Send her to the library, so she becomes a librarian in the book. Because of course, if you're living with seers, they're going to have records, right? And they're going to be the keeper of all the magic objects and all the wonderful things in the world. And so she starts going through this whole process of like learning everything there is to know to prepare her for her life that she doesn't know is coming. And she ends up meeting with one of the older Clares who has has seen her, even though nobody else has seen her future. and is able to tell her just a brief little bit that she should create her sending, which is she should create her own companion.
So actually, she did not see Lirael because nobody saw Lirael.
I thought she saw.
No, she didn't. She saw, so it was Philorus, and she saw herself. She was with Lirael, but she didn't know that from the vision, but she recognized the moment when it happened.
Okay. She kind of saw her, but she didn't know it was her.
Yeah.
Till later. Okay.
Anyway, that was her great grandmother, but she didn't know.
I guess I didn't put that together either.
Yeah, because she said
I'll read it again.
Or it said it. I think it said it. I know I just read it yesterday, so that's why I remember.
Anise has read this more times than I have, so I'm a little fuzzy on those things. So Lirael, while she's in the library, she learns how to create her charter sending.
Maybe we should say what sendings are.
Yes. Do you want to define that?
So sendings are like magical servants. The charter has like marks, like symbols. I imagine it's probably like Chinese or Japanese or something where there's just like tons and tons of symbols that all mean different things. And so a sending is a servant that is created out of those charter marks. And so like you can't touch them, your hand just goes through. They're kind of like spectral. And they do different things. There are guard sendings that like guard doors, or ones that are actual servants who do housework or cook or whatever. And so she is going to make a dog sending to be a friend because she has no friends.
That's really sad, but true. And they're like the charter, it's containing the free magic, right? And organizing it.
Yeah. So when she's making the dog sending, like something starts to happen because she's trying to build it, and then like just all this magic that she doesn't know where it came from is just like going into the dog, and then there's free magic there, which is like unrestrained and basically scary. Everyone is afraid of it. And it just goes into the dog. And so she's a mystery also, like Mogget.
Right, which is where I was headed, was that she's like Mogget's parallel here, whereas Lirael's just creating this dog to be her companion, her friend. She ends up in the course of the story becoming her guide and her protector, and she always knows more than Lirael thinks she should know, and she never really knows. Like, maybe she exists before I put her here. Like, there's something else going on. So she's kind of that parallel, but very true to, like, I don't know, the cat dog nature. Like, Mogget is the mysterious, devious, kind of troublesome one, and the disreputable dog is very like, I'm just happy to be here, and I just love you, and so the characters are sort of reflective of that, and it's really fun when you read those.
I found it. So the only part where it says it, Phyllis is saying goodbye, and she says, "Goodbye, my great-great-granddaughter. Remember your promise."
So I guess maybe I took that, like, I didn't know if it was hereditarily or just because she's one of the
No, I think it was because she mentioned, she said she was never close to Ariel or her mother. Okay. And so then I took that to mean she was close to her own daughter, but not to her. Anyway.
6 generations down. Okay. And she's been, I don't know, off in some room by herself somewhere, because as the Claire get older, the visions get harder to control. And so we kind of give them some space on their own. Right? Okay. I'm just kind of looking over here.
Well, we should see what our ratings are. We should start at the beginning.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, go ahead. What's your rating?
My rating is 5 stars.
Why?
Well, I've read it a lot of times. I just really like the story, and I can talk about it more when you talk about characters, but I like Lirael even more than I like Sabriel.
If you rated all of the Old Kingdom books because you've read them all, you did say this was your favorite.
This is my favorite, but A Porson, so I have to pretty much consider Lirael and A Porson the same book because like there's no break in between.
Okay. It's part 1 and part 2.
Because there was years in between Sabriel and Lirael, and then there was so it's confusing because the 4th book is actually a prequel. So I just scoot that one to the end. And then the one that just came out, Golden Hand, that one is 7 months after A Porson.
Okay.
But it seems like it's been a long time because it was like 15 years between when I read A Porson for the first time and when Golden Hand came out. So.
Oh my. I'm glad I'm coming to this one. They're all. So I was going to say 5, but if I'm like comparing to Sabriel, like it's really hard for me. I'm just going to go with 5, but like I feel like I enjoyed this one more reading it. Mm-hmm. But looking back over it, I almost think I like Sabriel better after the fact. Mm-hmm. It's got to be like a really close decimal point tie.
Yeah.
So their characters are very different. And I just think it's because I would like to live in this fantasy land with the library and the magic rooms. And, you know, that's where I just want to go when I die. So that just makes it a little bit easier to want to be there. Yeah. So I skipped over some things, I guess. We went over summary. Setting, world building, I feel like we've covered some things, but maybe a couple important things.
I have something to say.
Yes.
So about world building, I think that's a pretty big reason why I like this book so much is because of the library and like the way that the glacier is described. So there's a glacier next to the mountain that the Clare live in. They don't actually live in a glacier. But the way it's described, I never thought I would like living inside a mountain, but I would live inside that one. Because they have like gardens and the library is like enormous and has all these rooms, like you said, with all kinds of magical objects and like I appreciated how librarians were kind of like heroic and like they have equipment that they need and training that they need to do their job. And I just thought it was really cool. And I would do it.
Oh, yeah, it's the dream job. I guess it's like I'm kind of not hugely claustrophobic, but a little bit. And so the idea of living underground somewhere is not very appealing to me. But there's so many descriptions of like light, big, airy rooms. Like even the rooms that the Clare get together to do their ceremonial meetings are all like big, cavernous, beautiful, you know, descriptions that you don't get the feeling that it's like closed in. But there's some wonderful things about like wandering through little back secret tunnels. Mm-hmm. You know, you go through this little secret door and down this little hallway. Anyways, yes, and into the mountain and into these little secret places to find these hidden rooms that nobody's known about before. It's a little Indiana Jones, like totally would go for that. And yes, the librarians are like the warriors / keepers of the Clare, like the head librarian having her sword by her bed when she sleeps. You know, it's not light duty for them. It's a serious business because they're and the thing with all the keys, like you have levels of keys for every level of the librarian. Like they're pretty serious about what they're doing and what they're encountering, and they're not just keeping old books, but you know, objects that people don't understand, and to keep the people safe. So it's beautiful. A couple other things important that we didn't, I guess, mention was Belisar is the seat of the kingdom. So the glacier and the mountain where the Clare live and Belisar are all at the very north end of the kingdom. The south end of the kingdom is the wall, and then Ancelsier is south of the wall. Just go look at the beautiful map, right?
Yeah.
And Red Lake is where a lot of the story kind of goes back to during the course of like you go back and touch bases there several times during the story, which is the southwest part of the Old Kingdom. So close to the wall, close to the coast. And it's this area that the Clare can't really see. And they didn't realize they couldn't see it until recently. They just didn't have any visions about it, and they just didn't know it was a problem until recently. And there's a lot of trouble in the kingdom right now. There's a lot of issues that Abhorsen keeps getting called off to. Sabriel keeps having to like run out and put out fires because the dead are being raised, and they're not exactly sure what's going on, but it's way more than it should be. And Touchstone is off trying to handle the political end of it. So it's like they don't really see very much of each other. It's coming and going and a little crazy.
Yeah.
Before I move to characters, anything?
No, the other stuff I have is for other sections.
Okay. So we talked about Lirael and the disreputable dog, which are the main.
Oh, and so if we're talking about Lirael now, I have to say, so the first time I read this book, I was around the age that she is at the beginning. And I think that's probably partially why I like her more than Sabriel, is because when I was reading it, then I was the same age as her at the beginning of the book. And at that age of like 14 or 15, I think a lot of people feel that way, of being a misfit, or like everyone else has like all these talents or other things that you don't have, and just being kind of like separate or left out. And so like reading her story and how just like her journey was like really hopeful for me, to see that even if you don't get what everyone else has, that you have your own things that you can contribute, and that can be important to you, even if it's not what you thought you wanted.
Yes. I really loved that it wasn't the answer she thought. Like she just wanted so bad to have the sight. That's all she wanted. Even after I was well aware that's not the way that was going for you, and you're on a different path, and can't you see your own future like unfolding before you? You've had all the signs. That still, she just kept going back to that and kept hanging on to that. And I love that, like, she finally, like, nope, sorry, that's not where you're going, but here, you do have a place, and you do have a voice, and you do have things you need to be doing.
Yeah.
So, and I think you're right. I think for many, many people, if not everyone, you know, you spend a certain amount of time figuring out, what am I going to do with my life, and who am I? And so it's relatable. I also like that Lirael, like her process of becoming prepared is like a slow and steady process, and her character is so strong because she's been kind of alone all these years. Like, she's been with people, but she's not been close to anybody for so long. Is it like she's 5 when her mom passes?
When her mom leaves. Yeah.
When her mom leaves. So she's not close to anybody ever. And so her strength is like a deep inner strength. And when you compare that, we'll talk about Prince Sam, but when you compare that with him, like, it's just not the same. She just will do whatever she has to do, no matter what it is, because, well, that's what you do. You just count on yourself and you figure it out. So, and she learned that, like, long and hard lessons for many years.
Yeah.
Anyways, So, and anything, like, did you have anything to add about the disreputable dog?
Like you said before, I liked seeing her like as the opposite of Mogget. Because she really is like Mogget is just cranky and acts like a cat, and she's all cheerful and just like the dog everyone always wants to have. But even better because she can talk.
Right. I was nervous about her for a long time. Like, I don't know if I can really trust you because of Mogget and because of the premise with the free magic and everything. Like, I don't know how this is going to go. But in the end, like, I just love her, and her character is just so endearing, like, through the whole. She's like, I don't know, just a perfect companion.
Yeah, so I don't know if we want to talk about it now. We're in a different section, but does the walker choose the path or the path the walker?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I can't talk about it yet.
Okay.
The other ones.
We'll come back. If you want to, you can jump in. But I'm glad you brought it up because that comes up several times.
Well, yeah, and the dog says it. I think in this one she says it.
It's pertinent. Like, it's pertinent to Sabriel's story, but even more so, I think, Lirael's. We'll come back to it. Let's go more. Let's do characters more. Prince Sameth, or Sam, is the second child. I should probably go for the first child, but we're going with Prince Sameth because he's like a bigger part of the story. You see him more, you're part of his voice more often. So he goes to school in Unselstir, just like Sabriel did, and is like well liked, gets along with everybody. He's great at cricket. You get the feeling everything's just great, you know. He just everything goes great for him, and he goes home, right, for just like visits, but he lives there and he hasn't spent a whole lot of time training or preparing for his next life yet.
So, yeah, he's the person in waiting. At the beginning of the book.
Yes, and he, like, Sabriel knew she was the person in waiting, and her dad would come make visits, and they would talk about preparing for that, and she wasn't really prepared, but they had started to work on it. Well, he's older, and they haven't started to work on it at all. You know, like, he knows that's what's going to happen, but it's like they're not even going to start it until after he gets out of school. Until they get attacked by the dead, him and his classmates, and he has to go into death, and he has this terrible experience, and he just doesn't recover from that for the whole book. And that's where his character, I was talking about, like, Lirael's character is much stronger.
Yeah,
I think he's a bit weak at the beginning there, and for most of the book, I don't know if it's like just because everything's been handed to you, or what, but he doesn't have the inner strength.
No,
you know? He doesn't have the inner strength of character, and I realize part of that is the calling, like, but that's his situation. When he goes back home, we get to meet Princess Elamir. Is that how you say it too?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, who is the older sister? So there's only two kids of the Apporson and Touchstone, and she, like, has it all together. She's gonna be the queen, and she has the political part down. Everything is, like, from what you get, everything is smooth. I'm sure she has her worries and her concerns, but she manages them, and she's super organized, and she just has it all together. You know, I get the feeling like she knows who she is, she knows her role, and then doesn't, you know, like, I can't worry about the stuff I can't control kind of person. We don't spend a ton of time with her.
No.
Just a little bit. A little sibling rivalry there.
And so Elamir is around the same age as Lirael, and Sam is a couple of years younger. So I think at the point where they meet and most of the adventure takes place, Lirael is 19 and Sam is like 17, I think.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go read it again. I was thinking Elamir and Lirael were pretty close to the same age.
I think that was one of the funniest parts of the book is when they meet. Sam doesn't know that Lirael is his aunt, and she doesn't know that he's her nephew. And so when he starts to act a little bit interested in her, she's like, what can I do to make myself repulsive? And then she just tells him that she's 35. I thought that was so hilarious.
Yes. Well, and that's part of that Claire lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
That whole, like, they don't get married.
Yeah.
And so men just kind of hang around, and she's never been impressed with that before.
Mm-hmm.
She just doesn't want that entanglement. It is pretty funny. Like, she just doesn't have a great trust for men or having them around. I like how she like almost lets him float away and drown in the bathtub in the river, because I really don't know if I want to be bothered with that. Like, so, we talked about Sabriel and Touchstone are back in this book.
Mm-hmm.
They make somewhat brief appearances. They're a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're a little bit more worn than they are older. Like, time has taken more of a toll on them than actual physical age has passed. My favorite is when Mogget and the disreputable dog meet and get to talk to each other, especially when everybody else is sleeping or busy, and they just have like little conversations here and there, and you kind of get an idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're both much, much older. You know Mogget's old.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of aren't sure about the dog.
Yeah.
You kind of aren't sure if this is something that Lirael has just created herself, or, you know, has organized that's actually been around a while. Or anyway, so you get kind of that whole, that they've known each other a while, and that there's more to the story than you.
Well, and part of that too is that when he was making the dog, he had this little soapstone statue that she found in a room under the library. And somehow, like, she was trying to model her dog after this little statue. And somehow, when she was making it, the statue disappears and is gone. But the dog is there. So
When she leaves the glacier, she thinks the dog is gone, but she picks up the statue and puts it in her pocket, and then the dog appears again.
Mm-hmm.
Too. She can't figure out for the whole book why the dog is able to appear and disappear without any. Yeah.
He's a mystery.
Right. But I love the banter between Mogget and Touchstone, or Mogget and the disreputable dog.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I mean, you have the cat dog thing, but you also have, it's like ancient frenemies. I don't know. Like, story is much bigger. So, and then we just kind of hear that Caragor is still sleeping in the basement of the Abhorson's house, which is, I don't know, like, he doesn't really make a big appearance in this book. No. You kind of worry like he's going to come back at some point and mess around.
Yeah, and so the Red Lake, the reason why the Clare are trying to view that area is because there have been like reports of things happening over there, but nobody has been able to go over to see what they are. And so there's a necromancer named Hedge who is working over there. There's something buried inside a hill, something evil that is trying to get out. And so Hedge is like controlling all of these different pieces to work on freeing this evil thing. And I don't remember exactly what it gets to in this book, but we should probably also mention Nicholas.
Yeah, that was on my list. Go ahead.
So Nicholas is one of Sam's school friends. He's from Ancelstier. He's the nephew of the political leader of Ancelstier, so he's semi-important. But so near the beginning, when Sam's school group gets attacked by the dead, the necromancer Hedge is trying to get this little sliver of metal into Sam for a nefarious purpose, but it ends up going into Nick instead. And so that drags Nick, who does not believe in magic, into the Old Kingdom and under the control of Hedge, because sometimes this evil force just like wakes up in Nick and he can't remember what happens, but it talks and gives orders and things. So it's very interesting.
Like 1 minute he's himself and he's writing letters to Sam, and then the next minute it's, you know, the possessed voice that he's channeling somebody else, and you don't really know who it is that he's channeling. And sort of the mess that Sam gets into is because he decides that he needs to run off and rescue Nick from this. I don't know what's going on, but I just need to go rescue him because it's not safe for him to be running around by himself. And it's a much bigger problem than he knows it is.
Oh, yeah.
By himself to take care of it. So.
Yeah.
And then Lirael finds him drowning in a bathtub in the river by himself. So, yeah. So Hedge. So through the whole book, you don't know if it's Hedge or the other necromancer, which is Clore of the Mask. Like, what's going on? And you find out that Clore of the Mask was pretty powerful, and that she was in death, but that Sabriel had put her in death, but not taken her fully through all the 9 gates. And so they think that she's the one that comes back and causing problems.
Yeah.
So you get this idea that here's this extremely powerful necromancer, and it must be her that's causing problems. And here you have Hedges actually controlling her. So that sets up like Hedge is a much more powerful than you know. Like, you're not really sure what he's able to do or how strong he is. So at the very end, there's this poem/song that Nick quotes in his like in and out. Like, I think he was possessed at a moment, and then when he came back to, he was kind of, I don't know, sick, not well, and so that he could remember this. And so there's like a hint at who's in the hill from that. And it talks about, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it talks about like who created the charter.
Yeah, so this is it's the evil thing that says that. Because he faints, and then there's something else.
And then it happens. So it is when he's possessed.
Yeah.
But so it hints that one of the powerful that did not want to create the charter was broken. It says broken in two and buried under the hill. So one of the original powerful, I don't know to say creature or people, or we don't really know at this point. And that's what's trying to get out.
Yep.
And it just hangs there.
Yep. It does.
Just hangs there.
And so at the end is when Lirael finally finds out that her father was the abortion. Did you suspect that Sabriel and Lirael were sisters?
I did. I'm trying to figure out, think when I figured it out. I knew it before Lirael did.
Well, I think it always makes a point at the beginning. All the Claire have like really tan skin and are really blonde.
White.
And then Lirael is like all pale and has long black hair. And at that point, I was like, oh, that sounds familiar.
Well, it took me longer than that.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't fit. She doesn't fit. I don't know. It was probably somewhere around halfway through the book. And then, like, I was 100% confirmed when she goes into death with the mirror and she looks in the mirror and she sees the conversation between her mother and the abortion, but she doesn't know it's the abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
because when it describes it, you're like, oh, that's the abortion's house.
Yes. Yes. And you don't even, Anyway, so that's when I knew for sure. I was like, yeah, that's what I thought was going to happen. But she's she's in death and she's still kind of freaking out, and she doesn't put it together right away either. She has to like take time and think about it, and she still doesn't know who this person is,
Yeah.
It isn't until she gets into Touchstone's house. Well, and it isn't even really until...
Well, Sam says it, and he's like so relieved. He's like, you're the abortion in waiting, not me.
It isn't until the servant sendings bring them the wrong clothes. But that brings us back to, do you choose the path? Does the walker choose the path, or the path the walker? Because Sam cannot make peace through the whole book. He cannot make peace. Once he has that one trip into death, he is terrified of the idea of getting anywhere near anything to do with death ever again. Doesn't want to read about it, doesn't want to think about it, doesn't want to anything. And it's killing him to realize this is my job in life. How am I going to do this? How am I going to tell my family I can't, do this? I'm a failure. And then of course it all makes sense when you find out, oh, it's not really you. Really, Lirael's the abortion waiting. He's like, it's all good now.
Yeah. Well, I kind of liked that. Just imagining if I was in his place, like any normal person, if you had to go into death, you would probably feel exactly the same way. And so I liked the idea that there are people who are meant for that job, and maybe they have some sort of, I don't know, some sort of protection or something against feeling that way like he did.
But it's a bloodline. In the story, it's a bloodline thing.
Right.
So in theory, if Sabriel died, Lirael died, it would be on him again.
It probably would.
It would be on him again. And so it's almost like a calling, passed to you,
Well, and what's interesting too about Sam is that he's not comfortable with the abortion thing, but he is not good at the political side either. Like his sister is always trying to get him to do things that he doesn't want to do. And so he's really just kind of left hanging that we're going to find out what it is that he's meant to do.
That's true. Like Lirael finds her path, but he doesn't know his yet.
Mm-hmm.
And really, do we know how Lirael really feels about her path yet? She hasn't really gotten to go very far.
No.
Yet, as far as what is this going to mean for me? I mean, she kind of, I guess we didn't bring up that when Lirael goes on her excursions through the library with the dog, she ends up finding a path that is marked only for her, that only she can get through. And when she gets to the end, there are gifts for her on a table. And there was the book and the mirror. What was the third thing?
Pipes.
Oh, yes, the pipes. So we find out that they are for the remembrancer. Oh, they're not on my book. That's awesome. They're for the remembrancer. But the remembrancer is a player who can see in the past clearly.
Right, and they have to be in death and use those tools to be
Right.
able to see the past.
The book is similar to the Book of the Dead, but it's specifically for the remembrancer. The mirror lets them, when they're in death, look and see the past clearly. And then the pipes, they're like panpipes, let them, they're similar to the bells. They let them call the notes of the bells, but it's not as strong as the actual bells are. So she has this like, okay, so she just found out that she's a remembrancer, and then like thrown on this expedition, you know, like, okay, you have a mission, go. Yeah. And they send her out, and she meets Prince Sam, but then like in a matter of days, by the way, you're also the up horse in waiting. Like, so she went from having no purpose, no, like, what am I going to do with my life, to, okay, here's 2 giant things. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So
really big, and there's a lot more in the other books.
I have to get on it. So what did you have more about the walker choosing the path and the path choosing the walker?
Not that I can really talk about now, but I think it's both. I think you can make your own choices, but if you kind of think about what you're meant to do, or what your talents can help you with, and kind of combine that with your choices, then it will take you where you need to go, I think.
I think that's fair. I think that's how I feel about it in real life.
Me too.
But in real life. And I think, I mean, he sort of explores that. The reality is, if Sabriel gave up and quit one day, or, you know, there were no Epworson anymore, the world would not end, just charter magic, just the charter would end. And so, like, the battle for good or evil would tip.
Yeah.
You still have the choice to, you know, what your part in that is going to be. So, I guess you do what you're going to do. We were talking about reading order. So when I said one of my favorite things, like the author says, okay, here's the trilogy, and then they go, wait, I have to add this little bit more. Wait, I have to add this little bit more, which sometimes is delightful and wonderful, and you get all, like, you know, more of your favorite things. And other times you can't keep up, but when they write them and then they're not in order anymore. So they're the first 3 books, and then he wrote a prequel, and then he wrote the 5th book, which is really the 4th in chronologically speaking. Right? So yeah. You said that you have a different reading order.
Yes, I think it makes the most sense to read the first 3 and then read the 5th one and save the prequel for last. That's what I think.
You don't think there are things that you find out in the prequel that will change?
No, they were nice to know. So the prequel is called Lirael, with the subtitle The Lost of Horson. So you can probably guess who it's about. But I think after reading it, it gave me kind of like really high expectations that when this character reappeared in the 5th book, that like it would make so much more sense, and like she would be like a really huge part of the story, which she was a big part of the story, but she wasn't in it much. And so I think it just kind of built up a lot of expectations, and then I was just kind of like, oh. So I think it's probably, if I could go back, I would read that one last, because then I would find out all these things and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But it wouldn't have been built up in the same way, I think.
So for somebody that has never read any of them, which is too late for me, would you say to read 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, or would you have them read the prequel and then read 1 through 5? You would still do that?
Start with Sabriel. Because I think if I had started, well, and I think I said it before last time we talked about it, that I did not like Lirael as a character. Well, I mean, she was a fine character, but I didn't. Anyway.
Okay. So, well, there you go. There's our official reading order. And so I have to start a person, and maybe I will just save Lirael for last then.
Do it.
As far as reading versus listening, you posted, and I love you for this, but about the audiobooks are read by Tim Curry.
Yes.
At least not all of the audiobooks.
Oh, well, the first 3.
The first 3 are read by Tim Curry. I listened to the first one. I listened to Sabriel, and it was amazing. It's the best audiobook experience I think I've ever had, ever. And it was just awesome. And then this one I read. So my problem with the audiobook is that I couldn't listen faster when it got exciting. But it was good for me because it made me like listen to the details. When I read this one, like I could still kind of hear Tim Curry's voice in my head. I'm probably going to always hear his voice now, which is not a bad thing. But then, you do that thing when you get really excited that you're like, oh, wait, I might have read that paragraph a little fast.
Yeah.
So anyways, when I got to the end, I was like, okay, there are a couple details. Like, what were those people's names again? Like I cannot remember.
It's even worse in Abhorsen because they're like where all the action is happening. And like there's a lot of
get the audiobook and just slow myself down. I know it's one that I know these are ones I'll read more than once. And so I'm sure like after reading it a few times, I will remember every detail fine. But I'm thinking I just need to do the audiobooks for the first time. And I never feel that way. I always feel like you should read it first so that, I don't know if I'm just more visual. Yeah. And also like, so when a reader is speaking, like the way they pronounce a word or something might not be how I heard it. And it gives me the background for that. So when I'm listening to it, I actually know what they're saying. And it makes more sense for me. So this is the first time I've ever felt that way. And I just feel like Tim Curry needs credit for that.
Yeah, they're really excellent audiobooks. I only own 2 audiobooks, and this is one of them. Well, Sabriel is.
What's the other one?
The Golden Compass.
Okay.
The audiobook version of that one has like a full cast. And I think there is even some music in there. It's been a really long time since I listened to it, but it was very excellent.
Those are on my list. I haven't done them yet.
We'll have to pick it one month. It's really good. Yeah. I think BBC is making a series of it. I'm so excited. Because the movie that already came out wasn't that good.
I didn't see the film. I know they were on your list, and I put them on mine. I haven't read them yet. I'll remember. Good audiobooks are that too. So do you have the whole trilogy then? You have all 3 Garth Nix books?
Yeah, I have the paperbacks of the first 3. I thought about buying, so I didn't want to buy the prequel at all. I read it and that was enough. But the new one that just came out, I thought about buying it because I was pretty sure I would like it. But since it just came out in October, only the hardcover was out, and I felt bad that I had the other 3 in paperback, and I didn't want to have the other one in hardback, so I have to wait for the paperback to come out.
They have to match. It's fair. Oh, I do the same thing. Well, we'll have to work on that. Maybe you need both sets. Maybe you need a hardback pretty set and you need a reader set.
No, I know. I was looking at it, and I don't remember when I got this book. It's probably at least 8 to 10 years ago, but it's still in really good condition because it's a really fat book, and I always like when I read it. Usually I don't really care, like if they get lines on the spine, but this one is just it just feels so nice, and I just try to be careful when I read it.
That's so good. I definitely have ones I'm more careful with than others. This one's a treasure. This one's an important one. I think everybody should have the whole set. Although I'm a little nervous about Clario. We'll see how that goes.
Well, I mean, it's fine. It's just not. So I think part of my complaint about it is that at this point, the story had ended in Abhorsen. The end of Abhorsen was the end of what we knew about these characters. And I wanted the new book to be a continuation of what I had already been reading. And then when I found out it was a prequel, I was like, okay, well, it's still connected somehow. And then it was, but it was like 700 years earlier. And so I was like, okay, well.
It's not connected enough.
It's not connected enough. And well, this character is in the books, but is not someone you're rooting for. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. What about the one-off? The
short stories?
Yes. Were those?
So the first one that came out was in an anthology called Across the Wall, which has, I think in that one, Nicholas Sayre and the Creature in the Case is the only story that follows these characters. The other stories were just other things. So when I checked it out, I didn't read the other things. I only read that short story. And so that short story takes place in the 7 months in between Abhorsen and Golden Hand.
Okay.
And so I read that, and then there's one or two other short stories. One of them is called To Hold the Bridge, which I checked out a few months ago, but then I started reading it, and it was the same thing. It wasn't following the same characters, so I just didn't read it.
Sad day. All right, well, now we know. And I know I told you this already, but for anybody else, on the Australian website for the Old Kingdom books, there's a bonus short story, which I haven't read yet, but read every single thing, then you can also read that.
I'll go read it and tell you if you can read it or if you can wait until you read the other stuff.
Yes, yes. And we'll just have to come back and visit the Old Kingdom again. Do you have anything else you want to add for this one?
Probably not. But when we do the month that we talk about Abhorsen, I'll have a lot to say.
Okay. And I'm sure we'll revisit this when we get to that one. Because this one was a complete cliffhanger. Sabriel, I felt, was self-contained.
Mm-hmm.
Easy to add on another book, but like it wrapped up. This one, you just turn the page and you were like, hello, is this not done? Yeah. So we'll find out. So we'll pick a day and we'll do that one. Do you want to go ahead and introduce next month's book?
Yes, I should have pulled it out. So next month we are going to read Half Magic by Edward Eager, which is a children's book. It's pretty short. It's under 200 pages, I think. And so I own the book. I got it years ago, and I think I read it once or maybe twice. But it was quite a long time ago. It was, oh, whoops, that's the wrong one. It was published in 1954.
Oh,
So, so yeah, it's kind of an older story. So we'll have a cool sense of time when we're reading it.
fun.
It has a very good storyline, and it's really interesting and funny. So I think it'll be a good read.
That's awesome. I had picked it up. Haven't read it yet. It's probably been on my shelf like 6 months. And you said there's a series, which I didn't know. I thought it
Yes.
was standalone.
Yeah, so there's Half Magic, Magic by the Lake, Knight's Castle, The Time Garden, Magic or Not, The Well-Wishers, and 7-Day Magic, which I just picked up 7-Day Magic like a month ago at the thrift store. So, but I can't read. I have to read all these other ones first.
Have you only read Half Magic yet?
I have read Half Magic, but it was years ago.
Okay.
So I remember just like vague things. So
You have time.
Yeah.
And for anybody that wants to join us, it's a nice quick read, so it should be easy for the holidays, even if you have lots of busy things to do.
Yeah, or just read it to your kids.
Or read it to your kids. Or pick up a niece or a nephew or some kid on the side of the road. Go to the library. I also thought I'd throw in there that on the Garth Brooks Australia page, there's Garth Brooks. On the Old Kingdom Australia page for Garth Nix, he has a thing of like all his favorite authors and books through the years, and he does like one for every letter of the alphabet. And Edward Eager, is that how it is? Edgar Eager is his E, which I didn't realize that was the same person that did Half Magic. But so there's your time.
That is a cool connection.
How convenient is that? So, and in case you're interested, I always love like, what are my favorite authors reading? So there's a lovely little list. He has nothing for X. X is supposed to be, if you can think of anybody who's written an X author, please let him, or an X book, let him know.
Funny.
So that should be, I think that covers us for tonight.
Yeah.
I'll post the link for anybody for the Australia page, and then we'll see you guys next month.
Good.
All right.
Bye.